I'm thrilled that you're here. My name is Sharron Oxendine. I am the UNICEF Director. I work for KEA in the Barberville office. This is my second year doing that work. And we had an event like this last year that was in Barberville that was extremely well attended. And we wanted to continue, especially in light of all that's going on in Frankfurt with our governor. I just got this today and it kind of sickened me. This is the number of homeless children that are in each one of our independent and county school districts across the state. And if you'll see, the darker you get, the larger the number. And in eastern Kentucky, especially southeastern Kentucky, it's awfully dark. I'm a firm believer in order to fight your enemy, you got to know who it is. You got to know who they are. You got to know where they're from, what they're about, and what their purpose is. So I'm going to spend just the first few minutes of this presentation talking about who I believe, now this is my opinion, based on the information that I've seen, who I believe our enemy is. President Eisenhower, during his presidency, it was 56 to 60. Does that sound about right? I have no use for those, regardless of their political party, who hold some vain and foolish dream of spinning the clock back to the day when organized labor, that's us by the way, was huddled almost as a hapless mass. Only a fool would try to deprive working men and women of the right to join the union of their choice. This was the leader of the Republican Party from 56 to 60.
52 to 60.
52 to 60 because he served 2 terms. 1956 Republican platform. Assistance to low-income communities, protect Social Security, protect asylum to refugees, extend the minimum wage, improve unemployment benefits to cover more people, strengthen labor laws so workers can join unions, and equal pay regardless of sex. It's a little bit different than what it is today. President Eisenhower also said, should any political party attempt to abolish Social Security, unemployment insurance, and eliminate labor laws and farm programs, you would not hear of that party again in our political history. There's a tiny splinter group, of course, that believes that you can do these things. Their numbers are negligible and they are stupid. Now, I disagree with President Eisenhower. They're not stupid. They are keenly smart. In 1954, splinter group that President Eisenhower talked about became the Tea Party, and the Tea Party was funded, for the most part, by 2 men, Charles and David Koch. So, I'm going to show you a video.
Now, you've probably seen something on the Koch brothers and how their dizzying list of donations to political candidates and front groups are really reshaping American politics to advance their ideological agenda of economic freedom. But what you haven't seen is a mapping of how all the money moves and the different organizational entities involved and how they operate as a single entity, which we believe is really an unprecedented political entity on the American landscape, which we've never seen before. So in a few minutes, I'm going to walk you through that by using this little online tool that the International Forum on Globalization has put together called the Kochtopus, and it's on the influence of Koch Cash. So Charles and David Koch have a combined net worth of $50 billion. That makes them third wealthiest in the world, according to Forbes, ranked after Carlos Slim and Bill Gates. Their profits come from oil, gas, refining, fracking, tar sands, chemical, ranching, fertilizers, forest products, a lot of dirty industries and earth-destroying activities, but their biggest source of profits, we believe, comes from the commodity speculation in oil derivatives. Now, their wealth quintupled in the past 5 or 6 years from $10 to $50 billion through the operation of their being able to do the supply and the refining and the shipping, and then be able to bet on price changes for those different commodities of energy, oil, and gas. They move their money with the help of a number of advisors to several different types of operations to control the political environment. First of which is the media manipulators. Those are press professionals who create positive media coverage favorable to the Koch's ideology. So in some of the secret strategy meetings the Kochs convene, they have some of the biggest names in the media there to hash out the ideas and create some of the thoughts that they'll share with you over the airwaves. Then, of course, they'll interview many of the experts from the think tanks to promote policy proposals for less government that protect people and the planet, but more rights for corporations. So those are the experts from the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, American Enterprise Institute that you see interviewed by the media manipulators. Then, of course, there are the AstroTurf agents. Those are fake grassroots groups that project an appearance of popular support for ideas and policies that benefit big corporations. Foremost among them is Americans for Prosperity and the millions of dollars the Kochs have given to create and fund them. But now with the 2012 elections, they're moving even more millions through many different organizations to act as AstroTurf agents. Then the Wealth Warriors. These are the legions of lobbyists, armies of accountants and tax attorneys that keep wealth out of our government, like the Koch PAC, American Legislative Exchange Council, and the Chamber of Commerce, which we see are just single suckers on the larger entity of the Kochtopus. Then the congressional collaborators. That's the Koch campaign contributions that enable like-minded candidates to get elected and pass laws favorable to the Kochs. So this is a mapping of the different campaign contributions to members of Congress by the largest oil and gas contributor in Congress, which is Koch Industries, having outspent Exxon to kill climate legislation. They also are a big contributor to budget czar Paul Ryan, to Scott Walker, and to the strategist Karl Rove to make sure there are permanent majorities with their like-minded officials in Congress. Then there are the courtroom collaborators and judges that get appointed by those elected officials, resulting in rulings like the Citizens United decision of the Supreme Court that has allowed unlimited Koch cash to move through our political system. And then the minds of young people are invaded by the academic agents. Those are private contracts that the Kochs do to get their professors to teach their ideology, even in our public universities. And lastly, but also importantly, the physical force of police, military, and other security to protect them not only at their meetings and all of their industrial operations, but overall if law breaks down, if enough Americans view this as an illegitimate system of control. Now, the Pentagon might call this full spectrum dominance. But it's something that the Kochs have managed to achieve with their $50 billion of net worth, with their 40 years of funding this different influence network. And what needs to happen now is for all the different Americans who are being affected by this, and then their different organizations and grassroots groups to come together and come up with a plan about dealing with the money in politics and the influence of Koch cash. So you can go to ifg.org and poke around this Prezi a little bit more, as we've tried to make it available to people to understand how this unprecedented political entity is organized so that Americans can get more informed and more inspired to act.
One of the things that they talked about, and I guess where we're focusing more right now, is ALEC and Americans for Prosperity, which they called one of the fake grassroots groups that says that they support candidates for particular reasons. So ALEC is the American Legislative Exchange Council, and what they do is they invite legislators into and they have these beautiful retreats. They invite all of these legislators in, and at the same time, also with these legislators are these corporations. And the corporations just say, I want you to pass this piece of legislation because it's going to benefit my corporation for X, Y, and Z reasons. So you have all of these corporations that are buying, literally buying legislators to represent their interests. And you think, well, who's representing our interests? Who's looking out for the little guy? They boast that they have over 1,000 pieces of legislation that they introduce every year. And actually, one of the legislators in Louisiana, they gave them a piece of legislation that they wanted to pass in Louisiana, and the legislator forgot to take the ALEC title off at the bottom of the page, and it was actually introduced into legislation with ALEC on it. Somebody pointed it out. You might want to take that off because that pretty much shows that you're bought.
That banner.
The whole title of Keeping the Promise was ALEC legislation that Governor Bevin brought here, and he didn't even bother to change the name. I mean, that Keeping the Promise came straight from ALEC. ALEC is anti-labor union, anti-tax. They believe in nothing that we hold dear as citizens. They don't believe in Social Security. They don't really want any government. They want government out of everything. Americans for Prosperity tried their hand at making some real changes. And in the Wake County Public Schools, they actually ran 3 school board candidates back in 2009. And because they had so much money, they got those school board members elected. And the very first thing, since they had a majority, the very first thing those school board members did was call for neighborhood schools.
A new film by Robert Greenwald tells the story of how the brothers bankrolled a campaign to, get this folks, resegregate a southern school system. That's right, in America. And then along came the Koch-backed AstroTurf group Americans for Prosperity. The group got involved in the local school board elections, funding and organizing candidates who wanted to end the district's busing policy. The Koch-supported candidates ran in support of what they called neighborhood schools and against what they called forced busing, coded language that was also used in the segregated South.
The school board crossed the line with forced busing.
Forced busing is absolutely a code word. It's a term busing used in the South by George Wallace. Neighborhood schools means we have our own schools and the blacks have theirs.
So we heard loud and clear across this county, people wanted to go to a neighborhood schools model.
We should have our right to choose our own neighborhood schools.
In one election, they now have the majority needed to change the way students are assigned to school.
A big shakeup on the Wake County School Board could now impact tens of thousands of local families.
Is this America in 2011? You bet it is, folks. It's happening. Joining me now is the documentary filmmaker Robert Greenwald. His latest film is about Wake County elections called Koch Brothers Exposed. Why do the Koch brothers want to end public education? Mr. Greenwald, good to have you with us. Why do they want to end public education? I mean, is this the tip of the iceberg?
Yes, it is the tip of the iceberg, Ed, and these are men who've given over almost $20 million to think tanks that work to create an ideological framework about why public education is a failure. And as we know, they believe, as libertarians, as right-wingers, they believe in the destruction of virtually anything and everything that our government can provide. And it's a sad day when we see them using their money, intervening in a local election, and honestly doing whatever they can that's destroying the fabric of democracy by trying to buy their ideas.
And if local school board elections are going to be bought by people like the Koch brothers, what does that leave us with?
Well, it leaves us with a democracy for sale, and that's what they believe in, and that's what their ideology is. And where they're clever at is they buy the politicians, they pay for judges, they buy grassroots activists, and they try to make sure that the laws are changed so that their money can then not be tracked. So it's this whole web, if you will, supported, as we know, by a right-wing echo chamber. And they're not the only ones, but this is what happens when you have money let loose, when you have gross inequities in the way our society works, and when you have capitalism without any restraints whatsoever. They're the poster children for this kind of behavior.
And, of course, they're all about local control. They're all about infiltrating the local politicians and privatizing. That's really where they want to go. Reduce the obligation of the taxpayers and privatize absolutely everything you can get your hands on. And, of course, who will get the education? The wealthy. And the economically challenged in this country will be left behind, and we'll have a pool of cheap labor, which is exactly what they want. Mr. Greenwald, we'll have you back talking more about this, because I think this is a big story.
Yes, ma'am. So there's nothing illegal about that? No. They ran 3 candidates. They obviously were better funded than their opponents, and they won. And when they won, as any school board can, when you've got a majority, you can do anything you want to.
I know that.
You know that, because you've been a school board member. They for private school vouchers, for charter schools, they want school choice. And folks, when it all comes down to it, who benefits from school choice? Rich people. Rich people benefit from school choice, because they're the ones that can afford to take the kids from Harlan County to Corbin every day, or from DeWitt Elementary to Laurel County every day. Where do they think their kids will get the best education? The ones who can afford the transportation is going to be the ones that benefit. So you can see here all of the things that Bevin cut out. Now, was Bevin a Koch candidate? Not to begin with. I'm going to show you the progression, and all of this is online. I'm not making any of this up, I promise. From January to May of 15, Hal Heiner was actually the Koch brothers candidate. If you'll remember, he ran in the primary against Matt Bevin. Nobody knew who Matt Bevin was. He was from New Hampshire. May of 15, what he did very successfully is he introduced himself in every little test. So January of 17, Bevin appoints, this is a better appointment for Dr. Wayne Lewis. He appoints him the Executive Director of the Educational Policy and Programs for the Kentucky Education and Workforce Development Cabinet. Just this past April, after we beat the crap out of him with the sewage bill and all of that, he finds another way, another inroad. There were 7 Kentucky Board of Education members that were up for renewal or reappointment. He removed every single one of them, and one of the people he appointed, guess what, is Hal Heiner. And then Hal Heiner, some mysteriously magical way, automatically becomes the new chair of the State Board of Education. Now, who do they appoint? Dr. Wayne Lewis. Guess who was in Wake County, North Carolina when that Americans for Prosperity came in and took over the Wake County Public Schools? Any guesses?
Wayne.
Dr. Wayne Lewis. Did you know that? Well, that's yes. If you'll read his, and his resume is online. If you'll read his resume, it's very telling. The man worked for 5 years in public school, and he is your commissioner of education. So, and then the very first thing, who do they start picking on? The very first thing. The biggest school district in the entire state, the one that has forced busing, the one that they want to have neighborhood schools. So they start picking on Jefferson County immediately. Just this past October, Kentucky board votes to make Wayne Lewis Kentucky's commissioner. Wayne Lewis is all about charter schools. I find it interesting. Folks have finally started pointing this out. Does the governor have financial ties to charter school interests? Nobody knows, because he's the first Kentucky governor in 2 decades that has refused to file his tax returns. So people can see if he has any conflict of interest. Is Bevin back in charter schools to promote his political career with Charles Koch and other conservative donors? After all, they love charter schools. Bevan looks for every opportunity to attend their meetings and curry their favor. Last year when the Marshall County High School school shooting happened, you know where Governor Bevan was? At a Koch retreat. Currently, we have the Bevan-Hampton administration. Janine Hampton was the governor's running mate. She was the lieutenant governor. But in the last week? Yep. Governor Bevan decided that he's going to go another direction, and Senator Ralph Alvarado is going to be his running mate for his new campaign. Now, guess about Ralph Alvarado. He's the ALEC legislator of the week. Isn't that convenient?
Very.
So, if you want to read about Senator Alvarado, he's got apparently some really, really bad, dirty dealings, and there's been court cases that have ruled against him. Governor Bevan told us that he was going to do this to us. It's easier to fool people than to convince them they've been fooled. Because when you go back and you say, he told you, there's a place in America to take a stand. It's public education. It's the underpinning of our culture and political system. It's the great common ground. Public education, after all, is the engine that moves us as a society toward a common destiny. It's in public education that American dream begins to take shape.
Amen.
Amen. An attack on public education is an attack on democracy. Diane Ravitch.
Amen.
President Lincoln said upon the subject of education, I can only say that I view it as the most important subject that we as people can engage in.
Amen.
These children that are represented by these dark colors, public education is their only hope of getting out of despair. If you think of folks that spend the night in their car and they go shopping at the Walmart to use the bathroom, they go into McDonald's, an all-night McDonald's, so they can get a drink and they get a pie so they can have one place to stay. Those children shouldn't have to suffer through that. We're their only hope. And the more we can talk about saving public education as we know it,